Happy Thanksgiving. That's right. Thanksgiving is coming up this Thursday, and I wanted to give you my top 8 Thanksgiving movies before the holidays. Now remember, subscribe so you can get some more great content. Go into the description if you want a free ebook. There's a link in there. Remember to follow and all of that fun stuff. So let's get to it. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Great Stories Change the World. This is author M.B. Mooney, and I believe that great stories change the world. I am a science fiction and fantasy author, and I look at movies, TV shows, and books, sometimes maybe comic books. I might throw that in there at some point, but I look at this sort of media as a writer, and as a fantasy science fiction writer specifically. And yet today, I'm not going to be looking at a whole lot of science fiction and fantasy. Today we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving movies. The Thanksgiving holidays are coming up next week. People are going to be traveling. They're going to have a lot of days off. And what do? We sit around and we watch movies, or maybe we go to the movie theater now that a lot of things have opened up and people are doing that a lot more. And so I thought, well, maybe I should go over some great Thanksgiving holiday movies. But here's the problem. There aren't a ton of them. There are a lot of movies that kind of maybe have Thanksgiving in them. And so I kind of came up with a list of 8 that I thought are pretty solid, good, and fun Thanksgiving movies, or movies maybe you should watch around Thanksgiving. And so we're going to get to it, all right? Now, just as an aside, I did want to say, if you're a writer out there, and I had this thought as I was doing some of this research and looking for some movies, I thought, hey, maybe I should write a Thanksgiving movie. Maybe I should write a Thanksgiving story or whatever, because there's not a lot out there of people looking for it. Now, let me just say this. Also, one more little aside, there aren't any Hallmark movies on here. There aren't any TV movies necessarily on here. So this is more, except for one exception, these are, sort of major theatrical releases, all right? Now, we're going to start with number 8, all right? So here we go. Number 8, we have Son-in-Law from 1993, and it stars Pauly Shore, and he kind of had a little bit of success with MTV, and he had some success as the comic relief in a movie called Encino Man, which was pretty funny actually, and he was pretty funny in it. So they kind of gave him his own movie here, and it started with Son-in-Law. Now this is probably the best movie Pauly Shore made. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a great movie, but I happen to really like it. 1993, I was huge into MTV and music and that whole scene, and I went to the theater and saw this movie, and I really dug the movie. So it's really interesting. Pauly Shore and his friend Becca, Becca's like this, farm girl, and she goes to California to college, and she's, kind of wakes up to this whole new culture and gets out of her shell and this whole thing. But now she's got to go back for Thanksgiving, and she doesn't want to go alone and face her family. And so she brings Crawl, Pauly Shore, and because she doesn't want to date her kind of old high school sweetheart, she puts Crawl up as her fiance, like they're going to get married. And so that shenanigans ensue. Okay, so that's my number 8. I don't know what you think of it. It's probably not the best movie in the world, but it has a little nostalgia for me. All right, number 7 is Home for the Holidays. All right, Holly Hunt stars as this woman named Claudia, and her daughter doesn't want to do Thanksgiving, kind of bails on her for Thanksgiving. So Holly Hunt goes back to Chicago to her dysfunctional family, and again, it's a lot more dramatic. This isn't as much of a comedy. There's a lot more drama and relationship sort of character stuff. And Robert Downey Jr. is in it. It was directed by Jodie Foster. It's a pretty decent movie. It's not great, but it does center around Thanksgiving, and it's pretty good. It's got some good names in it, and it's a decent movie, all right? That one was from 1995, all right? Now, there's a few here in the 90s that I didn't realize were all in there. Maybe that shows how old I am, maybe my age, right? So number 6, we have Scent of a Woman from 1992. I also saw this movie in the theater. Now, this was a huge movie. It's Al Pacino. Chris O'Donnell was a young star, and he was kind of he and Al Pacino really had a lot of scenes together. And I don't know if Al Pacino got nominated for anything, but it was a pretty big role for him. And so basically, Chris O'Donnell is this prep school kid who is kind of given this job to take care of this old retired Army guy, Lieutenant Colonel. His name is Frank or something, and it's played by Al Pacino, and he's blind. So he needs somebody to help take care of him, but he doesn't want to be taken care of, and he's crotchety, and he cusses a lot, right? Because it's Al Pacino, and that's what they do. And so they develop a relationship, and then there's some other drama that happens, and there's a big, not really quite a courtroom scene, but there's some stuff that happens, and you know, it's fun, and it was a great movie, and we loved it at the time. But it all happens around Thanksgiving break, where this Chris O'Donnell character has to kind of take care of this guy over his school Thanksgiving break. So that was kind of what puts it on the list. But Scent of a Woman, great movie. Number 5 is Addams Family Values. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch to put it on the list, but I'll get to why it's on the list in a second. But Addams Family Values is the sequel to Addams Family, which is kind of it's a movie based on the TV show from the 50s or 60s, whenever it was, that I used to watch, and I loved Addams Family. And the original movie, The Addams Family, that came out maybe 91, it was pretty good, and I thought Raul Julia, Angelica Houston, Christopher Lloyd, Christina Ricci, like, stars. They all did a great job. Like, it was just so funny and twisted in its own kind of humorous way, but it was really cool. So the sequel, I think, is actually better, and a couple of different reasons. I think it's written better. I think they really kind of found the tone a whole lot better in this one, and Joan Cusack comes in. So this is from 1993, and the reason why it's on the Thanksgiving list is that Christina Ricci plays Wednesday, and she goes to like the summer camp, and I don't know why at the summer camp they do some sort of Thanksgiving play, and she's cast in the play, but she doesn't want to play. She refuses to be in the Thanksgiving play, right? So that's kind of what puts it into this category, but what a great movie. And really, if you haven't seen these movies and you're a fan of the Addams Family at all, but even if you're not, they're really well done movies, great performances, great writing. Number 4, this one's definitely a stretch, is Dan in Real Life. Now, there are a lot of movies that kind of center around some sort of family get-together, meal, holiday. Soul Food is one of those that I'm not a huge fan of for a couple of different reasons, but a lot of family dinners that people could stretch into Thanksgiving. But this one to me is a little more of a family getting together for the holidays sort of movie. And Dan in Real Life is Steve Carell and Juliette Binoche, and Dane Cook is in this. And basically, it's the family getting together, and Steve Carell and Dane Cook, they're brothers, and the brother brings his girlfriend in, and it's Juliette Binoche, and stuff happens, but basically Steve Carell, who is a widower, and he's still been grieving, and people just kind of wondering when he's going to get back out there, he starts to kind of fall in love with his brother's girlfriend. And so that's the conflict. And it's a really great movie. And people kind of told me that I would like it. And so I ended up watching it at some point. I definitely recommend it. I love this movie. And because it's kind of it's very much, it could definitely be Thanksgiving. They never say it is, but it could be, like the way it's all sort of set up. But it doesn't. But because I love it so much, I put it in here. So that's number 4, Dan in Real Life. That came out in 2007. Great movie. Number 3, it's kind of a stretch. And here we're getting into some of the fantasy stuff, just like we did with the Addams Family. We have The Wizard of Oz. This came out in 1939. This was Judy Garland's coming out party, in the sense of she became a household name. They went from black and white to color. It's a classic movie, right? If you haven't seen it, it's a classic. And there's so many things about it that are great. The music, the songs, the structure, the dancing, and it's so many things about this movie that it was huge when it came out. There towards the end of the Great Depression, and that sort of fantasy of living in the Dust Bowl and black and white, and then coming into this fantasy realm of magic and witches and fun stuff, right? So it was a great movie for a great time, but here's why it's on the list. You may not know this because we haven't lived in this culture for a long time, but back in the olden days, like the 80s and the 70s, they would play Wizard of Oz once a year. So one time a year, they would play Wizard of Oz on the TV. Now, this is before VHS. This is before video, definitely before DVD and Blu-ray and all that fun stuff. Like if you only saw movies when they came on TV, or it was in the theater. And so, Disney didn't put their movies on TV very much because they could just rerun movies, even the classics like Pinocchio and stuff, in the theater and still make money. Star Wars came out in the theater several times and kept making money every time they did because you didn't have a chance to watch it at home. All that to say is we waited all year to watch Wizard of Oz because it was a classic. Everybody loved this movie, and this was a Thanksgiving thing. Even though The Wizard of Oz is not a Thanksgiving movie, I put it here because this is what we did like every year. Like some people would watch the parade and all that sort of stuff. We watched The Wizard of Oz, right? So that's why it's here at number 3. Number 2. The last two were really difficult for me, but I had to put Charlie Brown Thanksgiving 1973 at number 2. Now, this is not a movie. It was not a theatrical release. So again, I'm not really even keeping up by my own rules. However, how do you have a list about Thanksgiving without Charlie Brown Thanksgiving? This was one of the best specials. The top 3 specials were all holiday specials for Charlie Brown. Of course, there's Christmas and Halloween, but here there's Thanksgiving, and it's just perfect. It's just a great little Thanksgiving story where Charlie Brown is kind of railroaded by Peppermint Patty, who was kind of railroaded him into like inviting everybody over for Thanksgiving dinner, even though like he wasn't ready and he's supposed to go to his grandma's house, and there's all this stuff happening. And some of these new characters are in here that we haven't seen before in some of the the main specials. So Peppermint Patty is one of them, and her relationship with Charlie Brown was really great. Like what a great writer Charles Schulz was, right? To be able to like bring in new characters, and actually they improved the whole dynamic of the show, right? A couple of the other classic characters aren't there, but of course Linus is, and so it's great, right? But I had to put it number 2 because I just had to. As much as I love Charlie Brown, at number 1 I had to put Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is a perfect movie. There are a few movies in the world that I would say are perfect movies. Just like there are some albums that I would say are perfect albums, perfect rock songs. This is kind of what I do as I look at different types of media. I'm like, man, you couldn't have done that any better. Everything comes together in quality, and you had 3 people at the top of their game. You had John Hughes, who did all the John Hughes 80s movies, and of course did Home Alone, and did a lot of stuff. You had Steve Martin at the top of his acting and comedy game, and you had John Candy at the top of his game. And you put these 3 guys together with a great script, and you had other great bit characters and secondary characters and all of this stuff. And of course, if you haven't seen it, I don't know why you wouldn't have seen this movie, but this is one of the best movies ever, and definitely the best Thanksgiving movie. But basically, Steve Martin is, he's just kind of beat down by work, and he has to travel, and he's rushing to get home because he wants to get home for Thanksgiving. That's the whole point. That's why it's on this list. But he wants to get home for Thanksgiving. and shenanigans ensue, problems, conflicts, obstacles, and he kind of joins forces with John Candy, who's this really annoying guy and does all this gross stuff and all this stuff. But as they go through it, they really develop a relationship, and it's really an amazing ending, and it's got a lot of heart, because a lot of what John Hughes was able to do was definitely, he had this amazing ability to be really funny. John Hughes did, and put things together that were funny, but also have a lot of heart, which is what makes his movies stand out and last, right? And endure. So that's my list. Top eight. And number one was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So let me know in the comments what some of your best Thanksgiving movies. Maybe there's a Hallmark movie I haven't seen that you think, man, this is a really good Thanksgiving movie. Or maybe there's something else that I missed. You let me know in the comments. Remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. And remember to go into the description if you like epic fantasy and you want a free fantasy ebook. All right. So happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have a great week with family and you just find even more ways to be thankful this season. All right. Peace out.